So after not being able to cover Capote vs. the Swans last week due to it clashing with a couple of other shows, I was able to give the first 2 episodes a watch just in time for this week's installment, which was episode 3. This show's been a really interesting ride so far. It's focused on glamour, wealth, status, the high life, but at its core, it's really shone a light on the sliminess and snake-like behavior of using others in order to manipulate them and to keep them in your pocket. This week's episode was focused on the black and white ball that actually happened, and it was filmed in the style of a documentary following the release of In Cold Blood. It was a beautifully crafted episode from start to finish, so let's jump into this episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is FEUD Capote vs. the Swans episode 3 ending explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The ending explained. The ending of this episode was focused outside of the context of the documentary being made, which Capote had spent the entirety of the runtime in. This was just after Truman had decided that after watching a cut of the final documentary that it wasn't the way that he wanted the story to be told. Truman was a man of words rather than picture and screen, and he said that his rise to being able to socialize amongst the high society would work better as a book with words on pages rather than as a film. Something which was more his forte. He planned on calling his book Answered Prayers. This is something that was actually the case in real life too. Answered Prayers was a novel that he wrote and was released in 1986, 2 years after his death, where the story was focused on the mixing of high and low social classes, which was based on his own experience of being amongst the Swans, what they got up to, and also what their husbands got up to as well. At the core of this episode, it was very much focused on manipulation, mental games, and keeping the Swans on their toes, something which Truman was extremely good at doing. He preyed on the fear that they had in being shunned by society, being a laughingstock, and having gossip being shared around about them. Following his non-fiction novel In Cold Blood being a success, he wanted to throw a ball to celebrate, but amongst that society, throwing a ball for yourself would be something that would be considered laughable. So what Capote planned on doing was having a ball in somebody else's honor. And whilst he didn't reveal to Babe, Slim or CZ which of them would be the guest of honor, he kept them all on their toes, wondering about who it would be. And he also kept them hoping that it would be one of them. This was right up to the point where Capote told CZ that she could be it due to her being in some trouble with the IRS and having possessions taken away, and also doing the same to Slim by indirectly saying that it could be her due to him accidentally inviting Pamela, who was now with her ex-husband. However, on the night of the ball, he gave it to somebody a little bit more left field, and somebody that didn't really roll in high society and was considered to be a bit of an outsider, and this was Katharine Graham. She was the official guest of honor. Something which went against everything that he said to the Swans, so he essentially made sure to keep them on their toes in the build-up, kept them hoping and then gave them nothing. So it was a real mind trick and form of mental manipulation. Slim, Babe and CZ spoke on their own about the bond that they each had with Truman and how close they were when compared to the others, so it's one that does really show the games that he plays. He spreads himself thin amongst them all, only because it feels like he might get something back. We saw in this episode that Truman said that he liked to swoop in and fix things, and he also mentioned that he likes to protect the women. Whilst that might be the case, it very much feels like he does it because he likes to keep in their good books. This episode was set in 1966, so it was outside of the timeline that we had at the end of episode 2 where Babe was no longer speaking with him, so we do actually know what he's really like. He's always recording with his mind, and he'll use anything that's said to his own advantage, and he'll only use it when it's most powerful. He comes across as a very calculated individual and knows his place well. It was said in this episode again about how Babe offered to buy him a house that was nearby, which he declined. This is because in episode 1 he said how there were limits to the gifts that you could receive before those type of people owned you. So he's very much playing the game and is aware of what he's doing, just as I imagine everybody else is in their own respective lanes. Right at the end of the episode, we saw that Jessica Lange appeared as his mother, and she said about how she was proud of him before they entered the dance floor and Swan Lake Waltz started to play. His mother was dressed all in black, almost like she was symbolic of that black swan that we saw during the opening section of the first episode of the season. Black swans are said to symbolize yourself changing from a victim to a victor, and with Truman's mother falling victim to the people of high society and not being accepting of her when she moved from the South to New York, and ultimately driving her to the point where she ended things for herself, With Truman being a success after his book was published, hosting a ball where all of the social elites were in the room and being talk of the city, that's a definite transformation, and something which would warrant his mother to be dressed as a black swan. With them dancing, the episode faded out and put the recreation of the ball to bed. I think in next week's episode we'll jump back forward to where episode 2 left off. At least I hope we do, because that seems to be where a lot of the drama's coming from and where the real meat of the story is. Overall review. I actually really enjoyed this episode. I didn't expect it to be shot like this when I first put it on, but I felt like having the ball shot in this documentary style format and also in black and white, it just allowed it to feel a bit more immersive and like we were a fly on the wall in the room, rather than just observing from afar. It also allowed all of the things that were picked up on camera that were secrets or would rather not be publicly spoken about to get picked up, and for them to feel like they had more weight to them. A moment that felt like it worked really well with that was when Cece was up on the balcony and people were gossiping about the fact that she had her possessions taken away and that it's one of the most embarrassing things that could happen. From there we saw her notice that, put her mask up and walk away. So I felt making it as authentic as possible was a nice touch. There was fear that was there amongst the Swans about things getting put out in the documentary which just wouldn't have been the case if it was told to us in its usual format. The casting in this season of the show so far has just been exceptional. Don't get me wrong, you've got a few of your Ryan Murphy regulars who tend to pop up in a lot of the work that he does, but he's always had that kind of thing going with the work that he creates, which is quite nice. But I would say that Tom Hollander as Truman is a casting that I didn't know I needed. He feels like he's really embodied the role and has leaned in as far as possible to deliver a performance that just really does come through the screen. I don't feel like it's Tom when I'm watching it. I also think the casting of the 3 Swans has been spot on too. The performances, the look of them, and just the way that they act is so convincing. This episode genuinely felt like a documentary, which shows that it was a perfectly constructed episode. With regards to how the episode looked outside of it being in the documentary style, it was short and brief, but I thought it still looked nice. The previous episodes have shown us that they're willing to lean into the grit and the grain in filming to really get across the 50s, 60s, and 70s vibe, something which I'm quite pleased about, because when a show looks good, it just makes the world feel that much more believable when it's in front of you. I'm going to be covering this show every week moving forward, so make sure you come back every Thursday for a weekly breakdown of the show. It's one that I'm looking forward to seeing develop, as from a stylistic perspective, it's just so nice to watch. So, there you have it. If you want to see more videos such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the card in the top corner. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this episode? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.